We've just read chapter 4. Some of us have listened to chapter 4. Come a little closer, guys. And the title of chapter 4 is Notice That Opportunity Lurks Where Responsibility Has Been Abdicated. So, Charlotte, what does the word abdicated mean?
Not taken care of.
Very good. Who enjoyed this chapter?
I did.
Okay.
I think for all of us, I'm not going to speak on your behalf because we've all got the next hour or so to talk about it. But I think all of us have been pretty good at this chapter. I would think we're all happy about it. I really enjoyed listening to this chapter because I felt like there's some loads that we've picked up that weren't necessarily ours, but we've taken responsibility and we've pushed and we've tried and we failed sometimes, but we feel good in some of that failure.
Yeah, I agree. And Sean, the reason I wanted you to do this chapter is because you're probably the champion of seeing what needs fixing and taking that load, even though you don't have to. That's why I was pleased that you were doing this evening.
Thank you, Dad. I'll give you that money a little later.
Yeah.
Did you fish for compliments?
No, I paid for them. I just bribed for them. Straight to the back. You want to grab people's attention immediately.
I feel like this one is the crux of what Peterson's been saying for the last 3 or 4 years. So although it's maybe the best chapter in that way, I also feel like it's the one I've heard the most repeated through his conversations. It really is for me anyway, it's like the center line of what all the other axioms come from.
Yes. What I liked about it too was that this is chapter 4, but I felt that he brought the truths of chapter 1, 2, and 3 into this chapter and kind of molded them together in this chapter. I thought he did that quite well.
Yeah, very cohesive.
Yeah.
Seamus and Esther, did it hit home for you? Is it stuff that is a territory that you've been in for a while?
First. I honestly, I didn't feel like it resounded with me because it's like, as you said, Sean, we've been doing this for years. So I felt like as I was reading it, it was for some other people who just hadn't picked up responsibility and had tried to walk through life basically critical, negative, always saying it's my boss's fault or it's, my wife's fault, but never actually having a go at looking at their own lives. So I didn't feel like it resounded with me personally, but I definitely have known people who really could do with a message like this, because they've got so much untapped potential, but they don't even see it themselves. They blame everyone else. So yeah, it wasn't a personal thing, but more the society does desperately need something like this.
What do you take away from it, Charlotte?
Take up responsibility is the best thing to do in your life. Like similar to set a goal, but this one he breaks it down even more. Like set something up that you are able to do, and then which is gonna be for the better for you and the people around you. I think you mentioned to me quite early on when we first started dating, he talks about life is suffering. Because before I was so happy, I don't think life is suffering. And because he was telling me, trying to help me understand, okay, life is suffering. You may as well do something meaningful during this whole process so that you suffer for something good.
I've been trying to show Charlotte that life is suffering the whole time we've been together.
You're the right person, Jaden.
Yeah. You're doing a good job, I believe.
Make me pessimistic.
Yeah, to give some background to that, prior to meeting Charlotte is when we were listening to JP. Prior to building 3Type, I used to go up the mountain and listen to his biblical lectures, his interviews, everything I could get my hands on. So when I say that this is the crux of what he's been saying, it's what I've been listening to for the last 4 years. And the whole, he talks in depth about Peter Pan in this one, and I felt a bit Peter Pan-esque up until the point that I listened to Peterson. And at that point, that's when I moved into my place in Toyman Hoy. I started working more. I got a relationship going, which I hadn't had for a very long time. So this one is very easy to apply to your life in a way that I think we have done. And when I met Charlotte, that's what we would fight about for the first 6 months, was just getting her to the same point, basically.
What's the Peter Pan analogy there?
He's the king of the Lost Boys. So his magic is in that he doesn't grow up. He doesn't take on responsibility, in the words of Peterson. So he's eternally a boy. He's not afraid of death. He has bad role models. Like Hook is the only man in his world, and he's been disgruntled and suffers because of a crocodile that is time, and that's going to ruin him. So Pan refuses to grow up, refuses to take on responsibility. And I felt a bit like Pan. And then when I met Charlotte, I saw that in her too, that she was so happy to do whatever. I used to have to self-medicate myself to do whatever. I'd get drunk all the time just to get through it. But she didn't. She had the same issue of no plan, nothing to work towards, no responsibility. But she was genuinely just happy in doing nothing. More like Peter Pan, yeah. So that reference there, and listening to him for those years, that was the big takeaway for me in this chapter, is that this stuff works. Yeah.
I think my takeaway from the Peter Pan story is that he is happy to stay in his fantasy, pretty much meaning like same as Abraham, the comfort zone in the tent with the father. And he'd never have to step out of that and try and do something or build something. So that it's very easy and happy, but it's kind of pointless in another perspective. Just look at that.
That was what your life was like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pointless. She would take any old side job. She didn't have an aim. She wasn't working towards anything. So I know it sounds harsh, but we've had these conversations in private before. Yeah. It was, in the true sense of the word, pointless. There was no aim to it.
Yeah.
And the same for me. There was no real aim to my life before I started listening to this stuff. I was just going through it, a bit of nihilism, a bit of selfishness, just wanting to make myself happy in the moment.
Which he brought up in the later of the chapter as well.
But by adopting responsibility and taking it on and getting meaning, like, that was painful and it was hard to do, but it was, now I can have a relationship with someone. So there's a real reward to that. Anyway, not to ruin the whole chapter, but I just wanted to give a context for, sorry if that made your job harder, Sean. I just wanted to give a context for why I think this chapter is so, like, the pinnacle of the whole book and his whole message.
I think one of the things that I've heard thrown around and I thought I understood was this concept of nihilism, pointlessness, meaninglessness. And I thought it was a very fringe idea, and not many people suffered from it or encountered it. And then when I've listened and read more of Peterson, I've seen this is a very prevalent idea, because the way that he explains it's much more tacked up. It's much more, and I can see it in people around me through my history, and to a degree, even in me sometimes. And that idea that Peter Pan, at some point in one offshoot of the book, I've never really watched Peter Pan. Is it a book? Is it a play? I don't know. But in one of the renditions of the story, Peter Pan at one point declares that he doesn't care if he dies. And then Peterson makes the point, but shouldn't you care if you live? And some people see that comment as he doesn't care if he dies as he's not afraid of death. It's a place of courage, but actually it's nihilistic. Nothing has meaning, nothing has value. And that's where I think the point of responsibility is so poignant with what Peterson says. It's like there's a purpose. And I've never liked the saying, life is suffering. I never thought that, because actually there's beautiful things in life. But I think life is suffering unless you've got some responsibility, unless you've got a boulder that you're pushing up the hill, unless you've got a weight, a struggle, something meaningful that you're fighting for. And then in that sense, it's like going to the gym. There is a physical weight that you're fighting against, but you actually feel so good. People who are used to, and in the repetition of going to the gym, when they don't go to the gym, they're very angry people. I need to get back to that resistance. And so I'm sort of understanding what he's saying at a much greater level, and I really appreciate it. Which made me appreciate this family even more, because I thought we generally, I mean, obviously we all got flaws and we all mess up, but generally we are people who jump in with both feet into responsibility. Sometimes to a degree that we shouldn't. We actually got to learn how to not take responsibility, something I've certainly had to learn. And Peterson's very careful to not make people go to the extreme. He's saying, listen, to the degree that you can. I'm not talking about working as a slave and killing yourself so someone else can take your credit. He's not talking about that. But I think we've been very good at taking extraordinary amounts of responsibility. And I think we've got a huge reward because of it.
Yeah, I think in terms of life is suffering, to go back to that point, death is coming for us all anyway, regardless of how good moments can be. And if you are working at something, chaos is still on its way. Someone's going to die. Something's going to fall out from underneath you. And in going to the gym and in working out and pushing that boulder up the hill like Sisyphus, you are building your capacity to deal with that chaos when it arrives.
Very good.
Yeah, that's where I think life is gonna suck regardless of how good it is right now. That's why with Charlotte, I was happy to show her that life is suffering, because at some point, no matter how happy you are, something's gonna happen. The storm is coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, so I'm not sure if that's on topic with what you're saying. I just wanted to bring it to that.
Very good.
I like it.
What were you gonna say, Nikki?
Esther and I were talking this afternoon, and we were saying just about this thing of taking on responsibility. We are all very responsible. We all see an opportunity, and not even so much an opportunity, but a need. And I think that's our culture, is that we see a need and we jump in and we want to help. And it's not always Esther and I were talking this afternoon, we used the word could or should. We could help, we could pick up that opportunity or that responsibility, but should we? And I think oftentimes people don't do it, and they could, but there's also the opportunities that we should or should not pick up. So very often I find myself burdened because I know I can do that, but should I? So we're just looking at it from another aspect, from what Jordan Peterson's sharing about how he can get people to think about purpose.
I think Jaden explained that last week when he said, if it's helping you towards your higher goal, then you should do it. But if it's going to distract you from your higher goal, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Is that right? Would you say that's a true
representation? If you were in the gym working on your legs and you're doing your squats, you don't want to be doing curls at the same time. You're just going to ruin your body, right? So there's an order of hierarchy of need and what you should be focused on. Also, if you've got a responsibility to do your legs, it's a detriment to your legs to be doing curls at the same time sometimes. And I would agree that that's what the Whaleys struggle with most, is not going into an extra responsibility and being responsible to your original responsibility.
Can I counter that? Because I think you're right, but sometimes you don't know the hierarchy of responsibilities. And sometimes what happens is people don't know what's most important, so they do nothing. And they do become nihilistic. And I'm so anti that I would rather do the wrong thing, even to my own detriment. And I'm not saying this is the right way to think, but this is just what I am. I'd rather do something than nothing, because maybe I'll stumble forward and realize this is the wrong thing to do, and then figure out what the right thing is to do. So a lot of people, this is the example I was thinking of when I was reading this chapter. A lot of people work at the big high-rise office building and they want to become the banker or the accountant or the marketing dude. And they start in the mailroom and they are not willing to do the mail to the best of their ability because, well, that doesn't lead me to become the best accountant or the best marketer. So I'm not going to do the mail because this is not my goal. And I think the point, and at least the way I interpreted of this chapter, was do the best damn job you can for the mail, because there's someone who's going to notice that. And even if there doesn't, there's something in yourself that goes, I'm a hard worker. I'm going to work through something. Even if I don't understand all of the elements of this, I'm going to become the best damn mailman in the whole building. And it might just be that
Opens the door.
seemingly unconnected action moves you closer to your goal. And I can think back to many occasions in my life that there's something completely unrelated to what we're doing right now, like making pizza and packing shelves and sweeping floors and cleaning toilets and being nice to people I don't want to be nice to, and all of those things that have set me up with an ability to handle the responsibility I have today, even though it's not directly related. And my personal message to anyone who's suffering with, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do, is do the thing that's in front of you and do it the best that you can. Oh, but it's not this, it's not that, it's not, I don't care. Just do what's ever in front of you the best that you can.
You gave me that advice 5 years ago.
I gave you that advice.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know if I should be doing filming or music or this. And at the moment, I was doing nothing. And you were like, just do something, you idiot.
This is rule number 7, by the way.
Oh, is it?
So, Jaden, how did that work out for you? Was it good advice? Was it bad advice?
It was good advice. I think action is always better than inaction. I think there's a nuance to my point, though, which is not, if you're in a position like I was where you're doing nothing, don't get hung up on what's the right thing to do. Do something. And I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
But if you are doing something, don't do something else that's to the detriment of your responsibility that you're already doing.
I agree.
There's normally time in the day to do something else, but don't do it to where it detracts from what you're already taken on as your responsibility. If you're Sisyphus pushing that rock up the hill, don't try and push that rock at the same time, because this one's going to crush you. So it's not a hard and fast rule, only do one thing, aim single-mindedly, but it is, I think that hierarchy is important, and to not take on exorbitant amounts of work. Like if you're dedicated and responsible to something, be responsible to that thing.
No, I agree. And I've suffered from exactly the point you're making, because I've overplayed, I've overabsorbed, I've taken responsibility that isn't mine, and it hurts me. And so I completely agree with you. But I'll also say this, and I think we're all on the same page. Most people are not in the over-responsible category. Most people are incredibly under-stressed. They're underloaded. They don't know. They do a 6-hour day and they think they're tired, you know.
Yeah. That's the part I was in.
2 days on a weekend and they still go, oh, well, I'm tired, I'm working. So, you know, we are not those sort of people. So what you're saying is right, Jay. Once you've got momentum, you've got to pick and choose. But some people have the choices and they don't make any choice. And it's nihilistic. I haven't realized it until reading more of Peterson recently. Like, oh yeah, that's what nihilism. Oh, everything. Well, why don't you do this? Oh no, it's not worth it. Why don't you just get out of bed and make your bed in the morning? Oh, well, it's not really worth it. Well, that applies to everything.
Yeah.
One of the example he uses at the end of the book is because sometimes we're involved in stuff and it can become mundane. But if you plugged into something higher, a higher goal, a higher good, he uses the illustration of a bricklayer, one brick after another, but then he's not just laying bricks, he's building a wall. And he's not just building a wall, he's building a building. And he's not just building a building, he's building a cathedral. So if you plugged into something that's higher, the mundane takes on purpose. And it doesn't matter how good your job is, there's always going to be mundane parts to it. But if you plugged into something that you understand and are striving towards, it makes the mundane acceptable.
Profitable.
Profitable, yeah.
It's like changing your baby's nappies. You do the best you can, you do it well, you bring them up, you raise them well, because you're actually building cathedrals. It's that whole concept that you apply everything to your life. You be the best mom for that infant. But yeah, that's the whole thing. People say, oh, I'm bored at home. I've just got this child and, I want to go back to work and I want to do things. And you think, what? I've never, ever, ever been bored. Never. I don't even know what that is, because you're just doing the best with whatever it is, whatever part of that wall is that you're building. No, that's seizing opportunities, isn't it?
Esther, have you had that perspective?
Not till more recently.
Can you talk us through some of that?
I used to avoid most responsibility, and I would choose jobs that were very predictable, very easy. I think I did a good job in what I did, but I never ever aspired to go beyond what I was doing, because I didn't see the point. It's like, I don't want to do this job, so why would I aspire to be a manager or be responsible for people? Like, I'm more interested in what I'm doing outside of my work than my job. So I'll come here, I'll do my job. I'm not sitting there doing nothing. Well, one job I was, but I'm mostly not sitting there doing nothing. I did find things to do, but I never aspired within my job. So I think for me, honestly, I think I was forced into responsibility. I think for me, having kids was the best thing. Because before that, I mean, it's not to say I didn't push myself at points. I think teaching was a big push for me, because I never wanted to do that. I probably still don't sometimes. But I think I was always pushed into responsibility. And then I discovered, as I was pushed and as I freaked out and decided just to do it, then I discovered why you push yourself. But no, that's not been a part of my mentality until more recently.
Besides from kids, is there any responsibility that you've voluntarily taken on?
I guess it depends what you mean, but no, nothing like.
Well, you've taken on art.
Maybe teaching.
Art? Haven't you taken on the responsibility to produce something, be creative, to be consistent at it?
Yeah, the only thing I used to ever do that I was passionate about was creative stuff, or writing poetry or things like that. But I was very it was all very selfish stuff. I just wanted to do it for me because I enjoyed it, and that's about it. I'd go to bed happy. I don't know if I was actually happy, but yeah. Anyways, I feel like I've been forced into it. So this idea, this concept of you take on too much responsibility, that is not a problem for me. Now the only way that I get into real responsibility now, besides the fact that I have kids, is that every morning I just say, Holy Spirit, show me what to do. That's my way. I do not go, there's a million things that I could be doing. What should I do? I surrender and I say, you show me which part I should do. And that's how I do it. Mine's super basic. So I'm level 1.
Jane, explain to us the story of who was it? Got it written down here. Of Osiris and what happened there. Because the ending of that story, which I'm not going to ruin your rendition, but the ending of that story is to voluntarily take up responsibility.
Yeah, I'll try to stumble my way through it. I don't know this story back to front. As I understand it, there are these the Egyptian gods, and Osiris is the all-father god, head style god. He's order, and he is old because the Egyptian gods got old, and he willfully doesn't look at what's happening in his realm. And his brother Set, who is malevolence, starts growing in power and dismembers Osiris and casts his body around the realm. Anyway, Osiris's wife, I believe.
Yeah, Isis.
Yeah, from the underworld comes up very angrily, finds certain parts of Osiris and gets herself pregnant, should we say, and has a son, Horus. And basically, Horus is like our Jesus Redeemer style character. He willfully looks, so his eyes are important.
He's like a falcon, I think.
I think the Egyptian gods could transform. So he had a falcon, which is very accurate attacker. They can perceive from a distance and they attack accurately, which is reminiscent of the word sin, to miss the mark, whereas a falcon is very accurate, so the opposite of sin. And he comes forth and confronts Set, and in the process loses an eye. But to the extent that you can kill a god, he kills Set, or at least puts him at bay. And Set is chaos and disorder and malevolence, really. That's what he represents. So through perceiving and willfully looking into the darkness, Horus is able to put things right. And he goes down into the underworld and gives Osiris his eye, rather than putting it back in his own face. And through that, they come back to the god realm and they co-rule together, which is really interesting. I think he saves his father from chaos, from the beast, from malevolence, brings him back, reestablishes him, and they rule together. So you have age and youth together, which is a really interesting concept, I find. Did I miss anything, guys?
No, that's perfect. I think one of the key takeaways from that was that Horus volunteered. He looked at it and then willfully took that responsibility on, even though it was arduous and potentially death for him. He took it on. And I think Peterson tries to make the point from that story is that there's huge gain, there's huge reward, and there's purpose when you voluntarily take on a responsibility. Because there are, like you said, Esther, there's responsibilities that come on you that you didn't even realize were responsibilities. But every now and again, we get a responsibility that comes our way that we accurately discern what it is. We know how painful, what the sacrifice will be, and yet we still take on that burden. And Peterson was very, very praising of that characteristic.
He actually says that at the beginning of the chapter. He says the things that you see are almost automatically your responsibility because you're the one seeing them. So if you're in an office or a workplace and you see an issue that isn't being resolved, that almost has to be your responsibility because you're the type of person that sees that issue. So I think that's relevant. So if Esther's waking up every morning and saying, help me, show me the way, she should be looking around to see what is wrong, what she thinks is wrong, and attacking those things.
Yeah.
I would say.
Oh, it's pretty clear. It comes pretty quickly what I should be doing. I don't have an issue. Like, yeah, once I do that, it's pretty seamless, to be honest.
But doesn't that mean
Basic.
like Sean's in a mess because he sees all the problems?
Depends how much problems you see.
Well, that's when Jaden's saying that, it's exactly what I'm feeling. I'm like, oh no, I see this, I see that. And I'm trying to learn to, in some sense, not see some things. Because sometimes you can be perfectionistic, idealistic. But as a general rule, most people are walking around blind, purposefully blind. Some people will step over an issue.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's harder to step over the issue than just address the issue because they willfully will not pick up responsibility.
They see it, but they don't do anything about it.
Well, they learn to avoid it. I learned this in Ireland. I loved working in Ireland. It was so fun. People are just incredible. But I would often get into trouble because there would be an issue and I would go and solve it just automatically. That's just who I am. I'm still like that. But my friend Zach, who you all know, would get angry at me and say, Sean, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I said, well, there's an issue. I'm trying to solve it. This isn't done. That person's there. I'm making sure it all works. He says, stop doing that. People will get angry at you because you're picking up something that they should be responsible for. And so the whole culture is set up so everyone's controlled and no one puts their head above the poppies. And if you do something that steps out of the boundaries, then you get pushed down again by your peers because you shouldn't be picking up responsibility that isn't yours, which is perhaps why the Irish drink so much, is because that's the culture, which makes Conor McGregor all the more impressive because his culture shouldn't be arrogant like that. It shouldn't be as flamboyant as it is. And yet he stepped out of so many different realms that he should just behave in. He's just broken all those rules. Perhaps a few too many, but that makes it even more impressive.
I think the English are quite similar. And I found some people in South Africa are quite similar. They don't like you because what you're doing shows them up. So they'll try and trip you up or make you look bad because they're not doing anything. There is that.
I don't plan on saying this, but Jaden and I were talking about this a little earlier. One of Jaden's students was reading something that triggered a distant thought in my mind. A book by H.G. Wells called The Country of the Blind. I read it, I think 20 years ago, and I've never thought about it recently. But a guy in South America, it doesn't matter, he gets trapped and he ends up in this little town that's cut off from the rest of the world. And everybody is blind. They had some sort of disease that they lost their eyesight. So decades ago or generations ago, people became blind. And so everything is done with blind people. And so he arrives being a mountain climber stuck in the middle of nowhere with his full sight. And people think he's an ugly, disgusting person because they can feel his eyes and his eyeballs haven't sunk into the back of his head. So he's now considered an ugly person. And when he tries to explain to people that he can see things and that he can do things that they can't do because he can run with clear line of sight, he can go out, he can do a whole pile of stuff that they can't, they start to get angry with him and try and cut him down. He falls in love with one of the daughters of the farmer or whatever. They agree to marry. But if the father said, if you're going to marry my daughter, you have to have surgery and we have to cut out your eyes.
Wow.
And so there's a little bit of a story to that. But it was just such a good analogy, H.G. Wells, a good analogy for those who won't see. And then when someone comes into your midst to show you something, that then that person becomes the target and you want to shut them down. Mm-hmm. And that's a very difficult place to be, is when you're able to see and others can't or won't. That's a very dangerous place to be.
Peterson talked about that a lot in families. So when he gives people this advice, start cleaning your room, start putting things into order, your biggest critics at the beginning will be your family, because you are showing them up directly to not be hitting a certain standard that they should be. Everyone's fine if they're all sinning. But if you start doing the right thing, it shows everyone up. It's like a spotlight that you guys aren't doing well enough. The rest of the house is a mess, but your room's clean. You think you're better than us?
Just cut out your eyes.
Yeah, cut you back down to size because it makes us feel better.
Isn't that a very sad mentality that people have allowed to just develop in their thinking, their standards? It's sad. We should be praising each other and pushing each other and encouraging each other to improve and grow and be. And when people do rise to the challenge and do that, to celebrate them. That should be our mentality in all things.
Didn't that happen to Jesus? He went and performed miracles in his hometown and he couldn't do anything there.
Nailed,
like,
literally.
Yeah, they didn't like him.
Carpenter's son, who's he?
Yeah.
How dare he?
Terrible.
It was my birthday this week, as well as Jaden's, but I'm twice as old as he is. So one of the messages that I got from Peterson's chapter this time was, it's never too late. Abraham was in his dad's tent until 75 before he blossomed and bloomed and took on the call of God. And I'm much, much younger than that. So it's never too late.
Are you going to blossom and bloom?
I'm going to blossom and bloom, but I'm going to wait till I'm 75.
And then you're going to leave your family and go out into the wilderness.
Yeah, I'll leave you all. And then get famine and betrayed and conflict with nephews, and I'm going to do all of that. Yeah.
And have two spouses.
I have to sacrifice one of you. Yeah.
What more responsibility are you going to take on? Do you have a plan? Because you've got plates full already.
Yeah, I haven't planned to take on any more responsibility. It's just what falls in front of me. That's what I'm doing at the moment. Although when I say that, there are some things I want to learn and do that are not falling in front of me. So I've got some plans to, expand my skill and capacity when I've got time. Yeah.
Do you not notice when you walk in, we're all throwing things in front of you?
Yeah, that's why I'm tripping over so much. Yeah.
One of the other concepts that Peterson starts to talk about is the difference between short-term happiness and some sort of long-term reward goal. And he talks about the community of selves. You want to talk about that a little bit, Bonnie? Do you remember the concept?
I don't remember. Sorry.
So he talks about even if you just assess things personally. Seamus, do you want to talk about this? Do you remember this part of the book?
You go right ahead, Sean. You're doing great.
Okay, so I'm going to pick up the responsibility because my...
We have default.
So he talks about the community of selves and how even if you assess things selfishly and said, well, I'm just going to do things that work for me, then treating people badly is not good selfishly because your future's coming for you. I've never heard that terminology again. And I've always heard people talk about death coming for you, but he's talking about life. He's flipped it. And so as your future's coming for you, your future selves, your tomorrow, your next week, your next year, your next decade, has to suffer the consequences of the idiot person right now, your present. And so even if you're just selfish, the community of yourself needs to benefit from the happiness going forward and the reward, not just the short-term, in the moment happiness.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just ask each of us, is there anything where we've had the opportunity for an instant happiness, just an instant reward, where we've not taken that option and we've waited for the future? We've seen something that could be captured so that our future selves could benefit, or maybe our immediate family or immediate peers could benefit from.
Every day when I get out of bed, I could stay in bed, but it's not going to help my future.
That's true.
And I think it's one of those things that Jaden talked about last week, that there are, I think he said it on the podcast, maybe he didn't, that there are deep truths that you knew, that you, it's the revealed truth, that idea of Socrates, that you've lost who you are and your life's journey is to rediscover that there are deep truths that just resound. And it's one of those truths I think we've all felt, that we're doing this now that maybe is not exactly what we want to do because of our community of views. So I like that idea very much, but I think it was something I know, but maybe couldn't articulate.
I used to joke about, that's future Jaden's problem.
Yes. Remember.
I think I was always quite aware of that idea of the community of views, but I would still neglect the future ones as something.
Let them deal with it.
Yeah.
We actually loved that. We thought that was really very clever. That's future Jaden's problem.
But he makes the point, Peterson does, that it's like interest, it's compounded. You don't deal with it now, it's not just going to stay at that level, it's going to exponentially grow. Yeah, I like that idea.
Have you done anything like that once, where short term you could have taken an option, but you went for the long term reward? I mean,
I think of like when we got married, I was putting a lot of pressure on you to get a normal type job, 9 to 5 in a school as a teacher. And you held your ground and said, no, I don't want to do that now. I want to build for the future. And we ended up for the first, our marriage, working very, very hard to set up so that you always talked about you want to be able to be anywhere in the world and be able to work from your phone, but not be restricted to just being in one place. But you had to work hard to make that possible. So literally the first 10 years of our marriage, we worked. We didn't take all the holidays. We did all the romantic dinners and, all the things you hear about in the movies, and people around tell you, all the nice things. I'm not complaining because maybe something, no. But we can sit here now and go, we came out of debt because we were in a hell of a lot of debt. Now we've got,
Much more money than we were in debt.
yeah, and we've got time now. There's flexibility. We could travel if it was possible with COVID restrictions.
We went on a 2-month holiday, baby.
Exactly, yeah. So I think I would say that's the biggest thing for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
If Bonnie was talking about marriage, then it's my relationship with Jaden. I could have not
Done much better.
no,
Could have done so much better.
but like
Settled, Charlotte, you settled.
no boyfriend pushes me or say like explicitly I expect this and this and this, I value this and this and this in our relationship. So I never really cultivated our relationship. So if I don't want that pain to have to think about what the hell do I want every day, and I can just walk off, but I don't want to. I love you.
Yeah, first 3 months, I made Charlotte cry 3 or 4 times a week with fights where it would end in, I think we should break up, because I didn't want to accept my future self having to put up with someone that didn't have an aim, didn't want to do anything with their life, wouldn't fight me if I was wrong. I wanted someone that was strong and had a vision that was in line with mine. So we fought nonstop for 3 months. It was brutal, but Charlotte came through it and had a vision, and it was worth the fight. Even now, like so short a time after that, and we still have fights, but it's much more seldom, and it's more to get back to a foundation that we both agreed on way back then. And then there's the little things as well. Every time you walk to jiu-jitsu, you could just stay home and relax, but instead you're going to walk into a place where some sweaty guys can be on top of you. You won't be able to breathe. Your arm's going to hurt. You're going to have bruises. It sucks, but you make that decision to walk there anyway and go and do it because you know it's good for the community of you.
What about you, Shane Esther?
Yeah, for me, I think I got stuck after university where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I think I was waiting for God to sort out, whatever God's going to do in my life. And a lot of young Christians wait for God to do something because you have this idea of grandeur when you're young, that things are just going to be quick and, things are just going to work out and you're going to step into your greatest dreams and destiny. I don't know. And maybe that's the millennial generation, but you just think things are going to work out.
I think Christians feed you that as well.
Yeah, because you feel like God's on your side, so everything's going to work out. But having to swallow my pride and go back to university or go back home was a real tough thing for me. And walking through one of the hardest times of my life, picking things up was a blessing in disguise, because I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now without paying that price. I wouldn't have met Esther. I wouldn't have, all these things. And it started something really good. But if I had tried to not see and try to resist and try to live in a fantasy where I didn't have to pay a price, I didn't have to sacrifice, I would have ended up a very shallow, empty person, probably very bitter. So I think life has a way of knocking off your rough edges, and it has a way of taking away your delusion and setting you on a path of, because suffering is good. Suffering is a good part of life because it hones your strength. It's a resistance, but it beats down your pride, which is a fantastic thing for people who are full of it. So that was my.
How does it translate to your kids now? You having that history, having those events happen, how does it translate to your kids?
I think with our boys, we have a strong base of love. We love them, and we always make sure that they know they love them. But every opportunity I get, I let them taste a bit of suffering, So if I've got shopping bags I'm carrying up the hill, I'll make sure the boys carry it. If there's a floor that needs to be cleaned, if there's chores to be done, it's not so I'm trying to punish them, but I'm trying to get them to understand that they will need to be able to do this. We teach very privileged kids, and some of these kids they've never done a day of proper chores or cleaning the house or washing the dishes. You put them in a kitchen and they're lost because usually their helper prepares everything for them. And I never want my kids to be a slave to having to have a helper. I never want them to be so underdeveloped that they're lost. And some of these kids will go up to boarding school in the UK and they will literally break down in tears when they arrive because they've got to do now their own washing and they've got to do their own bed linen and make their bed, and they've never done that. So we see it as such a blessing that we can take our kids and make them develop in the right way. And we say it's suffering, but actually it's training, it's values, it's character building. So yeah, that's how it translates. And we'll see if we can build a cathedral.
Amen.
So, Mom and Dad, how did you guys put that into us? Because we are, without being delusional, I think as a family, we're very strong in this category, perhaps to a fault. How did you guys put that into us?
Can I share about you being slobby?
No, of course not. Mum was very good. Carry on.
I'm gonna.
No, you're not.
When we first got married,
Wait, we've got to cut that.
when we first got married, Dad had come from quite a privileged background, and he had servants, literally servants. And we were trained, my parents trained us to be independent, to be strong, to have capacity, to be responsible for our own lives. And he wasn't trained like that. His parents took care of him, and he literally went from his parents' home to our home. And when I literally had to suffer through some of the things that he was like, he was quite slobby, to be honest, for what I would have termed slobby. And I just thought, I will never have sons. I will never have children like this. So when I had my 3 sons, my attitude was, I'm going to raise you to be good husbands. I'm not raising children, I'm raising husbands. What are you doing? He's laughing. And so as soon as you could carry your dish from the table to the kitchen, you carried it. And I used to read you The Little Red Hen. I don't know if you remember that story. I drilled you with the little red hen that the fox and the cow, whatever it was, didn't get to share the bread because they didn't help. And my attitude was always, we need to all serve together to be able to have the benefit of sharing together. So that's a good story to read to your kids, is The Little Red Hen.
You know that story?
Yeah, you did a good job.
With you.
With me. Yeah.
And he's not a slob anymore.
I'll give you the money that Sean gave me.
Opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated. Pick up the responsibility where you can, even if it's not yours, and great rewards will be coming your way.
Yeah.
Thank you, JVP.
Yeah.
Amen.
Bless that man. Bless that man. He's getting this message out to so many people.
It's good.
Yeah.
Bye.
I
I